Look, we are very simple creatures in the fact that the average human gets an insane dopamine hit when they get something new that they really wanted. Like, our primal hunting and gathering instinct from our ancestors has trickled down immensely to where we went from hunting our next prey to know what we're going to eat for that day to hunting Deku deals for the latest Switch game discount because the current market is fucked. Gaming is like a Pokemon trading card variant in the sense that it's this shining thing that everyone wants to get their hands on right now, scalpers included, and that's partly due to the fact that the medium is constantly getting new hype brought to it consistently on a really monumental basis. Like, whether it's with all the new games that are constantly coming out, the limited accessories that the manufacturers make that the hardcore fans really want to have and own, and arguably the most important piece of hardware that literally allows you to play or stream the games themselves is, well, the console. This innovative amalgamation of plastic, engineering, and chipsets that we never seem to have enough of was arguably one of, if not the biggest revolutions in gaming that brought that whole arcade experience that you would have to leave the house and often pay money per game that you would play at those events directly now to your living room in your own home, with the one-time fee of only paying for the console and every game and, controller that you would ever want. Back then it's a little different now, but you know what I mean. And as the home console evolved and got more popular with players, as did every generation of gaming alongside it with its new graphics and new phenomenal shifts in gameplay that overall kind of merged the needs of quality gaming and convenience to the idea of just justifying owning a console outright, which is why this is many players' preferred method of gaming just in the grand scheme. I can feel your RGB fans speeding up in anger. Calm down, we're gonna talk about you later. But you see, as gaming got better and better as the generations went on, it's led to the current generation that, don't get me wrong, it looks amazing. This is the best as gaming has ever been on a consistent basis, but it's definitely starting to reach an age of almost plateauing in overall graphic and constant gameplay mechanic innovation. Like, because of the ballooning budgets and complex development cycles, the industry's bumped up significantly the wait time between actual worthwhile new games that we get, yet still give cocaine bumps to the price of every new console that comes out on its release date. And it is an unfortunate trend that's led to many current PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series users in the midst of the console's lifespan question why they even bought the console, since the games that are barely even exclusive anymore, you can play them on last generation systems, but also it is becoming harder to justify not playing all those games and then some on the platform where the RGB fans are so speeding up right now. And then of course Nintendo has its own attributes, but overall, I want to help somebody that might be out there contemplating what the next generation of gaming is going to look like, and if they want to buy into that, or even if they have an older system right now and want to look into buying like the current lineup of generation of hardware. Either that, or just take a legacy piece of hardware in its library of games and just thug it out. Both are really cool options depending on how you game, but honestly, I don't want to sway you either way based on my opinion, and really, I just want to help you decide if you believe that playing on the latest console is worth it right now, or if you should just wait and stick to playing on older systems. So since we're talking about video game consoles, I don't think there's any way I could start this video off other than talking about obviously the game, since it's the one thing that you won't be able to afford after you buy these new expensive piece of shits. Now, even though I did kind of respectively crash out on the state of the latest games, I'm not extreme of that opinion, and I do think that every generation of console, no matter where it is, has just amazing games that push the industry forward in amazing ways that you would probably rather play on modern systems even if they have a last gen counterpart. And even vice versa. Maybe there's a game that you would rather play on an older gen system rather than going through the trouble of trying to, find the new console and play it on that platform instead, because overall, most of the newer games that come out nowadays, like I said, you can find them on both newer and last gen systems. And I think where it's concerned to the AAA big budget titles, those are the games on the last generation systems that you will honestly see like a big noticeable difference in overall graphics and frame rate issues, like playing the latest Call of Duty or the new WWE game on these PS4, Xbox One versions. Overall, I say all that to say that you really got to establish what games that you want to play, whether they're modern or more older titles, and just have that in mind when you're deciding what console that you would rather play on. Because if it's old games that interest you, then you just have an insane and, decades long of backlogs of titles that you have, open to you at any point in time that you will never honestly, get enough of. And it's just a much more reassuring thing where you hear the overall consensus that gaming in the older generation just feels much more, at the peak of creativity and overall fun, where these games felt like actual games and not just gobbles of, live service phishing baits aimed at the seed base of your wallet. But even still, on that opposite hand, gaming is getting better and better as time goes on still, and as we get more of those games that we have anticipated for a long ass time, it's still going to bring a worthwhile argument to, wanting to play the newer games that are coming out because, who wouldn't want to experience the next generation of things that we likely, haven't seen before when we do get those innovative games finally. And then for my next point, that's really the thing that's edging a lot of Nintendo fans as we wait for the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal in April, is the overall prices that you pay for these newer consoles or even sometimes the older ones. Because gaming has always been a hobby where you have to pay the cost to be the boss, especially around the time when a console first comes out, because a huge factor in gaming is the prices, especially now since it's only going to get more expensive on both the consoles and games as the times go on. And I mean, companies like Nintendo claim that they'll try their best to keep their consoles affordable for the average user, but Donkey Kong seems to somehow keep returning, so you tell me how much you trust them. And like I explained in my last video, it's important to play the waiting game for sales in both the games and the console itself, but that overall price range is something of a foundation that you want to lay out, beforehand just to have in general, because it's really important to understand just how much you're willing to invest in gaming in this point in your lifestyle. Because even though there are sales in those pack-in bundles that do save you money when they come out, the newer consoles unfortunately just don't seem to favor, having a substantial price cuts like we've seen in the past generation of, older systems. Now, I can be speaking too soon on that because we are technically only mid-gen with the PS5 and Xbox Series consoles as I'm recording this video, and the Switch 2 has not come out yet, so maybe then is when the Nintendo Switch will finally get a base price cut, but unfortunately, none of those consoles in this state have seen any substantial price cut other than, well, like I said, the sales. So if you're somebody that feels more comfortable buying consoles new, then that can be a little bit intimidating. But if you're someone that prefers to buy more retro or older systems, then the price pool is generally much more manageable, especially if you don't care about getting a console in its pristine condition, the older ones I'm talking about, and just getting one, out of the box from your local seller or something. But unfortunately, that pool of manageable prices is the exact same pool of pre-owned shit, and dealing with sellers who will try to justify, you paying higher than normal prices on dirt cheap consoles just because their listing has the magic words of testing and working. But I think the coolest thing about these older consoles is the fact that the most that you will likely pay outside of, the console itself, if you even pay anything for that, is really just the first party games for that specific console, since those usually tend to hold more value, and any of the console controllers that have any like motion control features like the DualShock or, a Wii remote, which still, hold a lot of value as far as like what you're paying on the aftermarket. But all the third-party games from these generations go for ass cheap because people, they likely just want to get rid of their childhood games or games that they just have taken up space that they have literal no use for in this modern age. So, you're definitely going to be saving a lot of more money generally if you're playing on older, or retro consoles. And then another thing that I think you should take into consideration that really only applies to if you don't know the exact roadmap of the console and what the future is going to look like for it is, if the console is going to have any redesigns or new versions that you might want to, pay or look into owning. And as far as the redesign, we don't really see this happening that much in gaming to the extent that it used to anymore, with the most latest example that we have to look off of being the PlayStation 5 Slim, which gave us a detachable disc drive but didn't detach shit off that retail. It's a worthy new console design in itself, but within its overall improvements internally, it's nothing that most players won't be able to notice off the cuff of the eye if they aren't experienced with this kind of ordeal. I highly doubt that we'll ever ever need a console redesign as bad as we did when the Xbox 360 had the red ring of death that not even Satan could top that pure fear, spread among humanity. The more likely thing to see when it comes to new consoles is the aforementioned new versions of these same consoles, like the Switch OLED that gives, not any new performance with this Switch model, but just a bigger and better screen that feels like the definitive way to play, Switch games. The only obvious downside to these new console versions is the upscaled price tag, with the Switch OLED going from $349 with the original Switch being at $300 and, no performance upgrades in any of that new price tag. So when it comes to things like the OLED model and the PS5 Pro and things of that nature, it really comes down to how much of a diehard fan you are of these consoles and these systems, and how dedicated you are to playing these games in arguably the best possible way at that time. So if you want to wait for those consoles to come out and play those versions, then that's definitely something that you would have to take into consideration. And then when it comes to old consoles and their redesigns, there's not much to be said about them since they're not getting any new ones, and you can obviously just, eBay or Google the ones that you specifically want and go from there. And thank God for that easiness, because I'm sure that the OCD players in the market for a PSP 2000 would lose their shit if they got a PSP 1000 in their hand. And then for my final point to provoke thought on whether you should buy the latest console or not, really comes down to the most important factor arguably in gaming in the modern age that is likely going to direct how gaming goes in the future, is just how much internet you plan to use overall in your gaming lifestyle. Because look, man, you can't hide from it. Most of the most notable experiences coming out right now are based on online experiences, or even if they're not like multiplayer games, then they just need internet to be played and, for verification purposes. Obviously a scary and just downright unnecessary evil within modern gaming, but even if you want to play like the online games current, last gen counterparts, or even games that are still exclusive to the older consoles, those experiences, while they're still manageable right now, they have a really just, overall ticking time bomb with how long they're going to last and be supported by the official developers and, official, console servers. And I mean, that's really with every console when you sit down and think about it, but we've seen in the last couple of years especially, most of the consoles from our childhood just get their online capabilities just straight up shut down. And right now, as of this video, the oldest console with official, online service support, where like all of its features, most of them at least, is the PlayStation 3. But again, speaking back into the present, it's probably a much better idea if most of the games that you play are like online based to play the more modern version of consoles to, obviously have more access to these games much longer and just the online features in general much longer. But if you're really bent on playing older titles on older systems that might not have official servers anymore, some games do have the option of playing peer-to-peer, which relies on like user connection to establish, online multiplayer features. Or if you're really tech savvy and, want to take that risk, you can play with modded servers on things like the 3DS that allows for all those online games that don't have official support to be supported by the community. Very worthwhile options, but unfortunately with both of those, if you're not careful, you can undoubtedly open yourself up to some serious security risks, whether you're playing peer-to-peer or maybe you just install or don't know how to jailbreak a system correctly and fuck up your system. But for some people, there could be some outside factors that you might be sort of accustomed to in like the modern scheme of gaming that you probably won't have access to on the older generation, like the Game Pass, the Switch expansion pack, or the PlayStation Plus, that give you all this convenience for arguably a cheaper price depending on how long you use them, and are just staples of modern gaming convenience. But even still, just going back even further from just the games themselves, other services like apps that you might have on your console, like YouTube, they might still work on the older systems like the PlayStation 4 right now, but like we already established, everything as far as these consoles goes has an expiration date. So soon the PlayStation YouTube app on your PS4 might be as useful as the Netflix app on your Wii console. Useless is what I'm trying to say. Having your console as a one-stop shop for all media is definitely a viable and really, widespread thing to see nowadays, but some people really still do just adore the entire idea of gaming just with the Wi-Fi router unplugged and just having an offline time of their life, since that's really just how gaming really started. Like, no matter how many fancy gizmos and gadgets that you put on top of gaming, at the end of the day, people, they associate picking up a controller and just, turning on a game and having that experience right then and there as like what gaming truly is in its base form. So, it's nothing wrong with having a old or a new console and just playing it in its offline capacity and just enjoying it as that. Like, that's perfectly fine and honestly, really what we've expected growing up with gaming into this modern era. So when it comes to buying a new console, it'll never not be like a thrilling experience to have the thought of like being at the edge and the forefront of whatever gaming has to offer in that current year that you're playing in. But there's always just going to be a merit in having older games and classic titles that you know for a fact that will, give you exactly what you want as far as like the games that you love playing, whether you grew up with them or, you just know about these games at all. So just choosing between either one of them is definitely not an easy task, but honestly, I don't think that there's a wrong decision to be made depending on, how much you game and, what you get out of gaming, depending on, what side of this equation that you decide to go with. So either way, choosing the latest console is completely up to your needs as, well, a modern gamer. And that's all that I got for today, man. If you enjoyed, leave a like on the video, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.